Her first day at week, we threw her in the deep end, and didn't she do well? Thank you, Ashley. The teaching this morning is entitled, Accidentally on Purpose. Accidentally on Purpose. Do any of you ever worry? Anyone here worry? Do you ever get scared about stuff? How your life's going to work out? What the future looks like? Any of you ever worry about how you're going to die? My wife does. For some reason, she expresses this fear most often when I'm driving. It's not because of the way I drive, I know how many of you think, but rather because she has been in and witnessed many accidents that has made this fear very real to her. She was worried now when she left this week. She's gone over to South Africa to be with her mum, who had quite a major operation, and she was expressing her fear to me. She was like, what if something happens in the plane? What if something happens when I'm driving over there? What if when I'm away from you? And this fear and uncertainty. She worries about how she's going to die. She's not the only one who has fears and uncertainties. At the moment, my fear is starvation. If anyone has a spare seat at lunch, feel free. Just putting it out there. We all worry. We all have fears. Fear of the unknown, fear of change, fear of death, fear of insignificance. And the Bible speaks into this very real human condition. And the place we're going to go to in the Bible to have a look at what it says is a letter written by the Apostle Paul. And he wrote it to the church in Philippi. But before we go to that letter, there's a story this morning that I've been wanting to share with you for a long time. I've been wanting to, but I've waited for the right moment to share the story. And it's going to take up quite a large part of our teaching time today. But I think today is the right time. The story starts in 2003. An eager bunch of young people, fresh out of high school, full of life, full of dreams, full of hopes, full of passion, joined Abundant Life Mission Group for a year of service, teaching, performing, proclaiming, and sharing the love of God. Of all the endless possibilities they could have chosen with their life after school, they chose to dedicate, devote, and commit their lives to serving God. One member of this group was New Zealand's very own, and some might know him, Digby King Adams. He was a part of this group. He originally comes from Christchurch. Another member of this group was a young girl from the local community, and her name was Yunundi. Yunundi helped. Her parents were members in the local church in the small town of Dundee, KwaZulu-Natal. They were keen supporters of Abundant Life. They had grown up in that community and been part of the vision for Abundant Life when it was first started. They were members of the committee. They cared for the young people that came to Abundant Life. They were really invested. And Yunundi and her two sisters grew up in this environment, seeing and hearing and knowing about Abundant Life. And they aspired to one day be a part of Abundant Life themselves. So when her time came and Yunundi graduated from high school, she jumped at the chance. The oldest of three daughters, many described Yunundi as an angel, kind, caring, respectful, thoughtful, wise beyond her years, full of fun, full of life. She soon stood out amongst the members of the group and was chosen to be one of the assistant leaders that would lead the team as they went out on the road declaring and proclaiming the good news. given this opportunity, she, like in everything else she did, poured her life and her energy into this serving, nurturing, and caring for her team, for the people they came in contact with. I knew Yunandi well. I knew her from my year at Abundant Life in 2000, but I also knew her because she was a distant relative. And whenever I was in Dundee, I'd often spend time at their family farm, sitting around the table, enjoying meals together, sharing moments together, riding horses, whatever you do on a farm. And in 2003, I also had the opportunity to get alongside and work with Yunandi when, on my way up to visit my then girlfriend, Elizabeth, I was asked to stop by where Abundant Life were having a camp. They were holding a camp. And they asked if I'd share a few teachings and some seminars, and I took worship for the Abundant Life group. And I had the opportunity to work alongside her and just witness her as she served and nurtured the people they were serving and the other members of her group. And that was in July 2003. Then in August 2003, Abundant Life were scheduled to come and do a tour down in Cape Town. At this time, I was studying down in Cape Town at our Adventist college there, Helderberg College. And I'd been asked to help host the team when they arrived there, to help get them settled into their accommodation, get them used to their program and their schedule, and just show them the ropes a bit as they settle into the touring life down in Cape Town. I'll never forget the day. It was a Sunday, and I was busy playing soccer. Surprise, surprise. When I paused for a moment behind the goalpost to have a drink of water, and I heard my phone ring. I looked, and the phone number was registered to Pastor Heino Torlache, who is the founder and leader of Abundant Life. I answered the call, and all he said to me, he said, "Norman, there's been a big accident. We don't know the details. I'm just phoning around, and I'm asking people to please pray." I gathered everyone who was playing soccer together, and I shared the news, and we said a prayer for God's healing, God's presence, and His comfort where necessary. 3 hours later, another call. This one was from Digby's girlfriend at the time, who's now his wife. And she confirmed, serious accident. 2 dead, 2 in critical condition. The others badly bruised and shaken up. The names of the deceased, Renee and Yunandi. This is every parent's nightmare. The questioning starts. What if? Why? What for? How come? Where were you? How could you have let? What was this all for? Here's this young, vibrant, promising life ended, cut short, spilt way too soon. Why, God? Why her? Then there was the group, this Abundant Life mission group, whose sole purpose was to serve God and others. What do they do now? The group's torn apart. 2 are dead. 2 are in ICU with months, years of recovery ahead. Was this the end of the road? How and where was God in all of this? The funeral for Yunandi was held in Dundee, her hometown. News of the tragedy gripped the hearts of the community, and it pierced the hearts of all of those who had been connected with Abundant Life and who knew Yunandi and the family. A few of us from Cape Town who had formerly been in Abundant Life and who knew the family well made the 1,600 kilometer journey from Cape Town to Dundee to be there for the funeral in a show of support, solidarity, and hopefully comfort for the family. Many who had known Yunandi from school came from far and wide. Some flew out from London and other parts of Europe where they were. Abundant Life members from all over gathered. Some had been struggling with their faith, others struggling with their commitment to the cause and to God, but they wanted to be there for the family, all asking and wondering why. One by one at her funeral, people stood up to share what they knew about Yunandi, how they'd gotten to know her, and how she had impacted their lives. With permission from her mother, Pastor Heino read some notes from her diary that she had entered in a few days before the accident. And this pretty much summed up all the comments about Yunandi and her life that people were sharing. She had written, "God, please lead me, fill me. I give you my life. Prepare my heart to be ready for when you come." Just a few nights before, the group had had worship, and the question had been posed to them, "What is your life's desire?" Her response, "To serve God." After the service, the funeral procession headed out to the cemetery on a nearby farm where she was going to be buried. The hearse leading the way, a few hundred people following. In order to get to the cemetery where Yunandi was going to be buried, we had to drive past the family farm. And one thing I haven't told you about Yunandi yet is that she loved horses. They had a number of horses on the farm. She absolutely loved horses. And her favorite of all the horses, a big black stallion called Shadow. And he was huge. I remember if I was standing tall, his shoulders would have been above my shoulders. He was huge. And the next picture we have up there is Yunandi for her formal, and she actually rode into her formal on Shadow in that dress. But as we got to the edge of their property, the road leading out to the farm where she was to be buried goes all along the fence line of their family farm. And right in the near corner, for whatever reason, all the horses from the farm were standing over the fence on that near boundary as the hearse approached the farm. Then something unbelievable, awesome, but undeniable happened as the hearse drove past their farm. As though cued by some invisible hand, the horses, led by Shadow, started running along the boundary fence alongside the hearse. And they ran alongside the hearse for the full 2-kilometer stretch before the boundary fence stopped their progress. Everyone that was part of that procession witnessed it. This was the Friday. The Saturday, as many of us gathered for worship and reflected on what had happened in the past while everyone was talking about what they had seen, what they had heard, what they had experienced the day before. They were talking about what they'd heard at the funeral about Yunandi and her selfless love, about her as a person and what characterized her life, her interaction with people and all of creation, that even the animals seemed to show their respects. And then gradually it started dawning on us. Everyone who was part of that funeral on Friday had been moved. initially violently shaken by what seemed to be an unnecessary loss of a young person's life, yet at the same time clearly called forward by a life given in service to God and honored by all of creation. Yes, her life was cut short, but the realization I came to that Saturday was that it was not lived in vain. Sure, we'll miss her and the life that she was, but her legacy continues. Then, as many of us thought at the time, if this is what people are going to be saying at my funeral or remembering me for, then surely it was a life well spent. And here's how I believe the Bible speaks into this. And so I'm going to invite you to turn to the book of Philippians. It's on page 709 in the Bible in the seat pocket in front of you. The book of Philippians. And as I said, this was written by the Apostle Paul as a letter to the church. And here's what he says. Verse 17, Philippians 2, verse 17. But I will rejoice even if I lose my life, pouring it out like a liquid offering to God. Other translations have there, like a drink offering to God. Just like your faithful service is an offering to God. And I want all of you to share that joy. Yes, you should rejoice, and I will share your joy. I want us to just understand the picture here. Here is the Apostle Paul. He's sitting in a prison in Rome. He's bound, he's in chains, he's being restricted and possibly even tortured. Yet he writes to the church in Philippi. And he starts off with these words, but I will rejoice even if I lose my life. He knew he was there in prison sitting on death row. Death was imminent. But he says, I will rejoice even if I lose my life. Don't feel sorry for me. Don't pity me. Why? Because I have chosen this. And he expresses that in the next part of that verse. He says, rejoice even though I lose my life, pouring it out like a drink offering, like a liquid offering to God. I'm pouring out my life. It is not a waste. It is not in vain. It is not being spilt. Whatever I am doing, the reason why I'm here, what I'm experiencing is because I have chosen, because I've purposed to pour my life into ministry and service to God. And so even though I may lose it, I know it is not in vain. And you see, here's the thing that Paul understood. And this is what I really want us all to understand this morning. From the day we are born, our life is being spilt. Thank you, Ashley, for the beautiful story and the beautiful illustration to help us understand that. From the day we are born, we are like that jug full of water, and our life is being spilt. Many people have expressed it this way: from the moment we are born, we begin to die. The life that we have, we can't keep it, we can't hold on to it. We never chose how we came into it, and we won't be able to choose how we leave it most often. And so our life slowly slips away and is spilled. So Paul understood that. He understood trying to preserve his life, trying to satisfy the desires of this life, trying to chase the pleasures of this life, trying to worry about how this life will pan out is futile, is pointless. Because one day it will all end. And everything you have tried to achieve, everything you have gathered or everything you have stored will be gone. What is interesting is this realization causes many different reactions in people's lives or in people's minds. When people grasp this as they're thinking and pondering about life and its meaning and purpose, some, it leads them to nihilism and despair. So if nothing that I do in this life has great meaningful significance, what's the point? If I can't hang on to or achieve something, what's the point? And they fall into despair and loss. Others, when they understand this, they direct their pursuits they pursue pleasure and addiction in trying to somehow capture or fill that void with something that might give them a good feeling. Others, when gaining this understanding, react by trying to drown out the realization with entertainment, keeping the mind and the soul entertained, that it won't be able to think about it. Yet the Bible says that sure, we realize this life is fragile and fading. And so why not stop the spillage? Why not direct the flow? Intentionally pour it into things of value, to serve for a greater purpose, to build a lasting legacy. The one thing that Paul hints to here when he also says, I pour out my life. It is something that I choose. It is something that I determine to do. It doesn't just happen by chance. If any of you question that, there's a very interesting thing that scientists have kind of established and discovered, and that is this fascinating principle that impacts and interacts in our universe called decay. Have any of you ever heard of decay? The whole idea behind decay is that everything in our universe is constantly moving to a state of decay. If nothing impacts a system, if nothing external influences a system, left to itself, it moves from a state of order or from whatever state it is in to a state of decay. They have labeled this whole idea, this term, this principle that acts on our universe. The scientific word for it is the second law of thermodynamics, where even our universe as a whole, that's why no one questions that we are heading in some point in the future to destruction. Because science has verified and shown that everything in this world, even our universe, is decaying. The only thing that can stop decay is when an external stimuli impacts that system, either giving it energy, either giving it a new, for us as human beings in our bodies, it's called food, that helps to restore and regenerate, but still we move to decay. From the moment you're born, you begin to die. Just for a maybe simpler example for us to get our heads around this, let's take an everyday system that, and I know it's a broad example, but it might help us understand, a young boy's bedroom. Okay. Young boy's playing in his bedroom, that's a functioning system, there's everything in there. If left on its own, will that bedroom have any chance of moving from a state of decay to order? What is the natural progression of that system? Order to decay. Unless mother impacts that system, or mother tells child to impact that system and cleans it up. That's a simple, broad example, but this is the reason why Paul says you need to make a choice. You need to be intentional about it. It doesn't just happen by chance. If you leave it to chance, what Ashley portrayed there before, then it just spills and it doesn't actually get poured or directed into the things of value and the things of purpose, the things of meaning. That is a choice, a decision that we make. But here's the beautiful thing, why I love this analogy of the whole decay principle is because Unless an external influence impacts the system has no opportunity of creating order. What does that tell us about our lives? What does that tell us about our spiritual needs? Reminds me of Romans chapter 12, verse 1. Romans chapter 12, it's just a few books further back in your Bible where you were. He says this, "And so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all He has done for you." Here's that sentiment again. Give your bodies to God. Pour out your lives to God. Why? Because of everything He has done for you. Let them be a living and a holy sacrifice, the kind He will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship Him. As we launch into 2013, my plea to us as a church is let's not live another year by chance. Let's not live another year just going through the motions. Let's pour our lives into the things of God, the things of meaning, the things of value. And this is something that is important to do and start with when you're young. And I can testify to this, and I'm sure many of the older people here would as well, that the habits, the things you do, and kids, I hope you're listening, and young people, I hope you're listening. The things you do, the patterns you form in your life, the habits you form now when you're young, stay with you right up until you're an adult. Your 18th birthday doesn't change who you are. Your 21st birthday doesn't change who you are. Our lecturer at Heidelberg College, and it's quite an old example, but he often used to tell us as students when he saw our working patterns as students, he said, you know, when you get to your church, the train journey, and he always used a train journey, but today it would probably be the car ride or the airplane journey from the college to your church is not going to change your working patterns. The things you set in motion now are going to carry you and be with you into the future. It doesn't happen by chance. It takes an intentional pouring and giving, a decision to give your life over to. Pour out your life for God. Many of you might ask the question, so how? What does this look like practically? When I walk away from here, how will I be able to do this? It's by choosing and inviting God into every moment of every day. First thing you do when you wake up, last thing you do when you go to sleep. Invite God into every moment of every day. Spend time in His company. Allow His word and His presence to impact your life. That whole decay principle, unless there's an external impact into that system will always be moving to a point of decay. Spend time with God. Allow His word and His presence to impact your life. And then live out your convictions. Live out the convictions He places on your heart. And all of this, Jesus summed up in those words, love God and love others. And so this is the choice we face. All of us are going to die. We don't have much choice about how we got here or how we'll leave. What we can choose is whether or not we let our life slip, be wasted, or whether we pour it out for a greater purpose and sacrificed for God. Yunandi lived that way. Her life was not spilt. Rather, it was poured out, just like Paul's, in service to God and creation. I know at least 6 young people who, because of the profound witness and events of Yunandi's funeral, recommitted their lives to God and are now pouring their lives into His service. And I am one of them. However, both Paul and Yunandi were only following in another's footsteps. See, once there was a man named Jesus, and he's the only one with authoritative wisdom on how to live. He's the only one who offers forgiveness for my junk, my darkness, my regrets, addictions, wounds, and brokenness. He is it. He invites us to bring our little lives. And he asks us, will you give it to me? Will you trust me? Will you come to me? Will you give your life to me? If you will, then just as his life was poured out for us. I don't know if any of you remember that when Jesus spoke about his death, he said, no one takes my life. I lay down. I pour out. I give my life. Just as his life was poured out for us, so too our lives will be poured out for a greater purpose. Something greater than our worries, something greater than our fears that we so often have. Do you want this?